Hey there guys, welcome back. I'm Josh Adrianson, also known as Tito. Today I am going to talk on Bible 101, the trustworthiness of the Bible. I'm going to give you a little bit of historical background upon it, and I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of evidence that I will ask you to consider. Now, first of all, I'm just going to talk about the New Testament to start out with. The New Testament is the four Gospels by the disciples, and also the epistles written afterwards, both by also from John and James and Paul and Peter. Now, I'm going to talk about why it is necessary to consider these writings as very trustworthy, as something that should be taken seriously. First of all, whenever you read the New Testament, I'd like to ask you to read it as a historical book. And I'm going to show you why. Many of you probably know Alexander the Great and also Julius Caesar. They are both very, very famous historical ancient figures that many people believe existed and believe they did the things that historical research has shown. Now, the one thing I would like to show you is that the writings about Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar are not very many. There is not very many manuscripts that describe the works of these two men, but nevertheless are very considered trustworthy, and they are considered as actual ancient figures that really did exist and really did do the things that they did. And there are other historical figures that I could talk about, but because of the time frame, I'm just going to use these two. Now, according to scholars' historical research, there are only about 100 manuscripts that talk about Julius Caesar, and most of them were written within a time frame of 100 to 150 years after the life of Julius Caesar, and they were not written by first source eyewitnesses. By that I mean that the people that wrote about this history were actually not alive or not old enough to remember any of the things that he did. Also, when it comes to Alexander the Great, the manuscripts, I cannot give you an exact number, but what I can give you is that the amount of manuscripts that talk about Alexander the Great come to about a foot and a half if you stack them all on top of each other. Also, the writings that talk about Alexander the Great, they were written about 300 years after the fact. Yet they are considered trustworthy by many scholars because if these writings would not be considered trustworthy, then Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great would be considered as never to have existed. Now, why am I mentioning these two figures whenever I'm trying to talk about the Bible? I'll tell you why. When it comes to the New Testament, the manuscripts that have been found and researched amount to, only in Greek, are amounting to about 5,000 plus manuscripts that are copies of New Testament writings. Why is this important? I'll tell you why this is important. They were copied directly from the source of the eyewitness reports. The Gospels are eyewitness reports. The epistles of Paul and all of the writings of Peter and John and James, those are considered eyewitness accounts. Writings by men that were still there, that saw all of these things happen and experienced all of these things. Over 5,000 manuscripts. And that's just Greek. There are also Latin manuscripts, about 10,000 Latin manuscripts. There are also Ethiopian manuscripts, Egyptian manuscripts, etc. If you stack all of the manuscripts and all of the pieces of evidence that point to the reality of Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection, the evidence amounts to over a mile high. So, if that is not enough for you to consider the New Testament as something worth reading, then I will give you a couple of more reasons here in a little while. God bless you guys, and I just hope you remember that if you know that Alexander the Great existed and Julius Caesar existed, and you have no doubt about it, then I ask you to consider reading the life of Jesus Christ.